So, Gary, how and when did you develop EFT, this amazing technique?
Well, I actually developed it. I started it in the early '90s. I ran across a psychologist in Southern California who passed away recently, Dr. Roger Callahan.
Yeah.
And he was the first to bring this whole idea of tapping on the meridian system for therapy purposes, to the public. And I was one of his very, very first students. In fact, I paid an enormous amount of money at that time. It was $110,000 to learn every single thing that he had learned at that time because I was not a therapist. I'm trained as a Stanford engineer. I've always been interested in psychology, but never really been a therapist. But here I ran across this and I started learning it. And me being a non-psychologist, I was getting results that were just jaw-dropping. Okay, and I was a beginner. Okay, and so I was really enthusiastic about that. Um, Roger's particular method got to be very complex after a while, and it got to be complex in a way that when an engineer looks at it, a scientist looks at it, they go, "This is maybe a bit too much, and is not necessary." Okay, and Roger's not a scientist, but he had this tremendous impact on the world by starting this out. Okay, but I started looking at all that, and what I did was I took all the complications and I threw them out. I threw everything out. Okay. And as an engineer, I started to put back together what really worked. Okay. And so we ended up
Simple
with a,
or as
I'm,
possible.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Now, I'm just saying that's what works for me is keeping it as simple as possible.
Yeah. So what I did was I refined it down to what really worked, and it ended up as something that any people could do for themselves. And it was simple, very understandable. We can teach the basics to a 10-year-old boy, 10-year-old girl. I mean, in fact, we even have a case where a 10-year-old boy helped a friend of his with a fear of dogs, okay, by what little he knew about the tapping process, okay. Now, it does get more complicated, Sue, after that, but the complication isn't the EFT process itself. The intricacies come about because the human system is intricate, and people give you all kinds of different challenges with it because they have all kinds of different mental things that go on, etc. So it's more learning how to take this simple process and apply it to the individual circumstances that arise as time goes on. And so that's where some complication comes in. But the actual basics, piece of cake, anybody can learn to do it. Okay. So anyway, that's how I learned it, and I put it out. I put it out to the world in the mid '90s after I developed it, and I had no idea it was going to be a worldwide phenomenon. And so I put it out. I mean, I had a mailing list of 20 people, and I had some videotape stuff about how to do it, and I put this out. And I said, just do what you want to do with it. It's just a very precious process. I don't want to put any legal fences around it and, royalties and all that other stuff. Just here, go forth and multiply. Blend it with something if you want to or whatever. And people did that. Okay. And it is a result for two reasons. One, that open hand, if you will, that process that I just let everybody work with as they wanted to. And the fact that it worked, spread it massively around the world. Now, that's the good news. I also got to mention here the not so good news is that when it got spread in a very inconsistent way. I mean, imagine being in a classroom with 1 million people in it and you give somebody a concept. Every person in that room hears the concept, but it goes through their own belief system, their own filter, if you will. And so when it comes out, it's a bit different.
Different, yeah.
So that's why we see hundreds of variations of EFT on the internet, and that's why I put together our EFT tutorial. So we have on our website, it's free. So we have a standard for everyone to use. So,
Yeah, that's great. And your website, Gary's emofree.com.
yeah, www.emofree.com. Yes.